Okay, please, JD will kick it off.
Okay. First just an update on John Gray and the roster move. So John had an MRI today. He's got a oblique strain, left oblique strain. So estimated timeout is probably about 4 to 6 weeks. Can be probably 2 to 3 weeks before he's throwing again, and then a similar time to kind of build back up. So obviously he'll go on the IL, and Taylor Hearn will come up in his spot. The intent is for Taylor to be in the bullpen, and then Josh Spores is up in Matt Bush's spot. Both those are effective today, and then we'll have another move later this week for a starter to take John's spot in the rotation. So, and do you want to do questions on that first, or do you want to do it, John?
Why don't we
Just the whole thing? Yeah. Okay. So then I'll just touch briefly just over the kind of overview here. Activity leading into the obviously the trade deadline here this afternoon. Should I give a little bit of our thought process and then answer your question? That we've had probably it started later, just given the draft, the dialogue in earnest started later. We'd had some discussions dating back and kind of set the stage for some conversations a little earlier than that, but really in the last week or so, things picked up, as you saw in the market. Our general intent was to help the club this year, as well as build for the future, and really address putting together pieces that could help us win in 23 and beyond, as well as this year. I think as we've how we've played here the last couple weeks, and then just the nature of the standings, our focus shifted slightly from that to more players that would be here in 23 and beyond. And so while we were involved with a few players that would have been kind of quote unquote rentals, really our focus was on players that would be here beyond this year. And we a few of them we felt we were pretty aggressive on. The bidding was in some instances got to where we were uncomfortable, and some that just our evaluations of the players, we decided not to push further in. I think we all like the kind of instant gratification. I think the exciting part for us is we have all of our resources moving forward into the off season to address the areas that we want to address, and both financially and young talent that will either play for us or could potentially be used to acquire the types of players that we're looking for. Obviously, we made the one trade there with Milwaukee. Felt we got really good value there, and it was kind of over the line, and it made sense for us. We didn't go in the last couple of years. We were kind of more clearly in a rebuilding phase, and so it was of the mindset on some level that we had to get good value, but that we were going to move certain players. We did not take that approach this year for a variety of reasons. But as you see in the market, the players on expiring contracts generally get very, I think, low returns in terms of the players back, and so for a couple guys that here, with Martine and Matt in particular, that are so important to this club, and we just felt like we weren't going to be at the whim of the market. We weren't just going to take the best offer at the last minute, kind of these buzzer beater deals that you see race across the bottom of the screen. We were going to hold a pretty high bar. For a variety of reasons, not the least of which they're important to this club. They're important members of the team. They're contributing on the field, and to take them off the team and have the kind of corresponding drop in the product on the field for our fans, we had to get something back that not just something interesting that might turn out down the line. We wanted something back that we were confident was going to play for us and impact the organization going forward. And equally as important, we're interested in retaining both players in the future, and wanted to keep that avenue open as well. So, we ultimately held a pretty high bar with those players and several others. We had a lot of dialogue. Some got closer to fruition than others, And like I said, we feel from a long-term standpoint, we're still in really good shape in terms of having the flexibility and the options financially and with young players to do what we want to do. We would have loved to have kind of landed one of the bigger players for our team and our fans, but it wasn't to be at this point.
Good.
No, well said.
Okay.
Kind of what you
Well said.
what you were saying, JD, about Matt and Martine in particular. How much more valuable is it when you're considering them long-term options for this club to have your eyes on them on a daily basis for the remainder of this season for either of you?
Yeah, Emily, it's something we talked about. I think most importantly is that we have an exclusive opportunity to negotiate an extension should that be an avenue that we can find some common ground with both players. So it's certainly of interest here, but beyond that, we'll let that play out and see where it goes. There's a lot of baseball left to be played, but certainly that was something that came into consideration for us, is having that opportunity to potentially negotiate prior to an open market.
What else, Jeff?
Are you guys on that avenue toward an extension with Martin Perez specifically?
Rather not get into specifics. We'll handle those things kind of behind the scenes, but we would welcome having him back.
Stefan.
JD, were you saying that the way the club has played the last couple of weeks altered the way you approached the draft, or not?
When I say that, I don't mean in a style of player. I just mean the reality of where we're at in the standings, right? We'd probably be a little bit more aggressive. We had wanted to be aggressive, wanted to consider, rental players, and got to a point where we felt that 8 games back of the wild card and several teams ahead of us, we didn't want to pull. We want to keep that possibility open. We know, the odds are the odds, but we wanted to give this club a chance and not, we were not looking to trade off everybody that was called on, but at the same time, we wanted to be responsible and not, spend a lot of resources in terms of short-term plays.
What else? Jeff, then CJ.
Did the Seattle trade for Castillo shock the market? Did it raise prices beyond what you thought they might go?
I don't think so, honestly. I mean, I think that was kind of a one-off deal. I think he was probably valued at a price point above, maybe where some of the other players that were available were. I thought Cincinnati did a good job to get good value there, and Seattle did a good job to get a difference-making player. So, but I don't really, I don't think it had a domino effect.
Regarding Martin, now that he's here and he's staying, the innings compared to what he did last year and the year before, is there any talk about a cap where you're comfortable going with him for this season based on I think he's already passed where he was last year or close to it?
CJ, we haven't had that discussion specific to his workload. I think more importantly, just the way he's recovering, the way he's throwing, the way the ball's coming out. Martin has had he's had some innings accumulations in the past that are on par with what he's on pace for this year. So we're not overly concerned. He's 31 years old and knows how to take care of himself and has done this before. If it were a younger pitcher, his first time in the big leagues, we would take that into consideration. But not at this point are we overly worried about his innings total.
So safe to say the expectation is he'll make his rest of his starts this year.
Absolutely.
Were there any discussions with the Yankees about Joey?
I'd rather not get into specifics.
Other questions?
That answer also apply to Juan Soto.
It does.
What else? Yeah.
On Gray, is Cole Reagan's a real option to take that spot?
He certainly pitched very well and is in consideration.
Stefan?
John, how, if at all, how important is the way the club plays the last couple months regarding your manager? in the future?
Yeah, I was going to answer it before you added that caveat there. I mean, we've been talking a lot about. I think there's real value in building momentum into 23 for a host of reasons. Really to do with our fans and the club and kind of expectations into next year. I think we said pretty clearly we expect to take a step forward this year. We had hoped to that we could maybe overachieve a little bit and be in playoff contention. But as we've said all along, we really feel like next year we expect to win.
What is your evaluation of the manager?
I'll say this: like we've been in the draft room and trade deadline here for the last 3 weeks, and so probably if at any point we've been a step away from the big league club, it's right now. I think we're where we are in the standings, but that is not a reflection of like any one person or any one group. Ultimately, that's that's really on the two of us more than anybody else. And I think Woody and the staff are working tirelessly and doing everything they can do to continue to develop this group and push forward. But as far as evaluating individual departments or individual people, it's not something that I want to do right now.
What else? Kennedy.
I guess obviously you guys didn't acquire any starting pitching. I guess how important is that going into this offseason to add more pitching behind John Gray? And I know regardless of what happens with Martin and what's been going on with the minor league pitching side right now.
Yeah, it'll be our clear top priority.
Levi.
So I heard you guys explain why to not trade, Martin Perez or Matt Moore, the value to the team, interested in an extension. On the flip side of that, as far as acquiring younger guys that would be under control for the next few years, without getting into specifics, can you kind of give me an overview of what was the market like for players like that this year, and were there any opportunities that, again, without specifics, that you guys were pursuing there?
I mean, there certainly were a couple of key targets that we pursued pretty heavily. Again, in really key areas of need, primarily starting pitching, but there were a couple other individuals that we individual players that we pursued. Really, it just came down to the bid and the ask, and it got to a point where we were uncomfortable. Let me step back. Going in when you're trying to compete to win a competitive bid, like it's going to get uncomfortable, and you have to be in that range to even have a shot. We were well, beyond that point on a couple specific guys, and ultimately we decided not to take that next step, and it's. I think we're constantly weighing that against who's going to be available this winter, and as free agents, our own young players, how they fit in, and just anticipating what the trade market's going to look like, and this winter, and then again this time next year.
Back to Emily.
With the deadline now having passed and kind of like where you are in the standings, like you were talking about in the, kind of the strategy you took into it, will there be more of an effort to bring up some of these young guys, see what they have, figure out what you've got in these final 2 months as far as pieces for next season and moving forward?
Yeah, Emily, I think it's an important part of the next 2 months, and it's certainly nobody's going to be given the opportunity. It's got to be earned, but there are some players that have put themselves in good position, and we're looking forward to seeing those players over the next couple months.
Joe.
John, was the uncomfort in the bidding process based on what it would do to a farm system from a depth standpoint, or was it the talent and the projectability that people were asking for?
Yeah, you're saying was it like quality or quantity? It really depends on the situation. I mean, listen. There were a few players that were available, some who moved, some who didn't. That we were prepared to get to pay a high price for, and there were some that that we just that our evaluations didn't line up with what the ask was, and so it's a little bit of both. But we feel like we have both top end talent and depth. And that was confirmed by some of the inquiries we had. I think there was nobody on the market that we were told, hey, you guys don't have the pieces. But we it had to be the right fit overall, and we just didn't get there.
Couple more, Tyler?
So, having just done this really thorough evaluation process, aside from starting pitching, are there any insights that this has given you for targets for the offseason, either particular players or particular positions that are going to be an area of focus?
I think starting pitching will be the priority. We see what I just touched on. We want to kind of see some of these young players and give some opportunities to some of the guys, especially in the bullpen that factors in as well. So we'll see where we go there, but potentially in the pen, and then I think our position player club, if we have good health with Mitch coming back and some of the young players that we have, we think the position player club is in relatively good shape. There's potential to add a piece there, but the main focus will be on the pitching side.
One or two more, John?
Is it safe to say that some of the conversations you have will carry into the offseason?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable deal, and that's kind of what we had to keep kind of stepping back and reminding ourselves that this is not it's a deadline in the sense for the next 2 months. Come November, it opens up 100% again for to build the club for 23 and go forward, and we have a lot of confidence that really most of the players in our system are arrow up, and will most likely be asked about in the future. So I think some of that was ground. It was not our intent to lay groundwork. Our intent was to see if we could close a deal. It didn't get there, and so a byproduct of that is we have a better idea going forward.
Last one, Levi.
Kind of a similar question to that. Looking at the winter, right now there's only X number of teams that are buying and X number that are selling, and I know it's a blurry line. On one hand, in the winter, there's going to be more teams. The optimism runs high in December, right, about what teams will be able to accomplish next year. On the flip side of that, there's probably more guys available that wouldn't have been available this deadline. Like, how do you go about even juggling those two sort of competing factors?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
It does. I think what happens in the winter too is that right now, for the most part, contending clubs are not going to trade off their big league team. Generally, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, and in the winter that opens up because they have alternatives to replace those players at positions of need. So I think it's a lot more fluid in the winter than it is at the deadline. There's a lot more options, and that's where I think knowing both our targets, how we value our own players, and then having that dialogue with other clubs is really critical.
Good. Thank you very much.